Are you ready for some more AI? All right. Figured we should have put something a little bit lighter towards the end of the conference, right? You were like, holy shit, my head is exploding or not, but hopefully this will make your lives a little bit easier. So we'll talk a little bit about DeepResearch. How many of you use DeepResearch in ChatGPT? Okay. Okay, so I see like 4 or 5 hands up. It is probably one of my favorite features, and it's become a starter of everything that I do. I start with DeepResearch. So I didn't know I needed it that much before, but I feel it's kind of opened up so many different workflows that I do. For those of you who don't know, what is DeepResearch? We'll take a look at it, but we're going to do a lot of examples, and maybe I'll take some audience participation as well, so we can do a couple of use cases. But essentially what it is, it's an agentic, autonomous agentic analyst in your browser. You can feed it a prompt. It builds a kind of a research plan, gathers sources, reasons about those sources, pivots, cites sources, brings information together, digests it. Think about a McKinsey analyst or an EAB analyst or an RNL or Ancora or whatever. Like, think about one of those analysts that's going out, putting all these pieces together, doing market research, whatever you needed to do, reasons about them, and gives you a really amazing report that's really, really good. And then it's also powered by these reasoning models, right? So all 3 are Gemini Pro. So it's an agent. It's one of the first agents that's been implemented in ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, depending on what tools you use. It runs multi-step tasks end-to-end, and there's no babysitting it. So you can just fire it off, and then you can leave it in the background, or you can just close up your browser. It's going to work in the background. Sometimes this process takes about anywhere between a few minutes to, some of them have taken me half an hour to kind of give results back, depending on how deep that research is. And then the output is a fully sourced report, so ready to copy and paste. You can export it as a PDF. You can use it now as the basis of the context for additional content or for additional questions that you need to do. And that's how I've been using most of it. And we'll take a look at a few other ones. So if you haven't seen it, this is kind of what it looks like in ChatGPT. There's a button down. They've changed the interface since, but there's a button that says DeepResearch. You can ask it a question. It's going to ask you some clarifying questions. And to understand a little bit better or to get that context, you don't have to give it just this one simple question. You can provide a lot more context to it. You can say exactly what you want it to do, what research you want, what sources, and it's going to go ahead and do that. So that's just a very simple example that they put together as part of their website. So what you see here on the right-hand side, it's actually the process of that agent going through, searching for sources on the internet, digesting those sources, that information, reasoning about, building new questions on top of that, going out and pulling more information in, and kind of going through this process many, many, many times in order to make sure that it's going back to answering your initial question. So this is probably the biggest unlock over the last few months on agents and this agentic entry point with ChatGPT. There's been others like Codex or others, but this has been the first one. And this is all the slides that I had. I just wanted to introduce it, so we're going to go into it and kind of take a look at a couple of examples. So let's go in here. And actually, let me see if I can. if I can find, I have a whole bunch of, give me 1 second here. I'm gonna see if I can find, here we go. So what I had done is I went in, can you guys see this? Okay. Bigger. Okay. So for those of you who, I'm going to introduce the tool directly in here. So in ChatGPT, we can start a new chat, and underneath here, there is something called tools. And it looks a little different than what it looked in the video, but there is something called Run DeepResearch. Once you hit this, then you can select sources. It only had one source, and we're going to deal with just the web search source, but DeepResearch can connect to a lot of other sources as well. This was introduced, these additional sources were introduced very, very recently, as early, I think maybe just a few weeks ago, or as early as 2 weeks ago maybe. But essentially, you can connect it to your Gmail or your Google Drive or some of the other connectors that they have in here, Teams and so on and so forth, so your internal data repositories as well. So not only SharePoint, Teams, Outlook, email, Box, Dropbox, and they're going to keep adding more and more. And guess what they're using underneath to connect to all those different data sources? If you were here on the prior presentations, they're using MCP. So all these different systems are exposing MCP as their protocol. But regardless, what this allows you to do is run deep research on your documents that are internal to your organization. Internally, if you connect your Google Drive or your Teams or SharePoint, and then also you can go outside and grab information from the web. Today, we're just going to be using the web most of the time, but this becomes very powerful when you provide multiple sources to it. So you can do research on the web. You can also look at your documents. You can reason about that and build these very, very dynamic reports as part of deep research. Now you might be asking, you're like, well, Ardis, I don't know, like, what can I use this thing for? And what I did is I actually ran a deep research question in here and said, help me research deep research features on AI tools for practical use cases, my presentation at Engage 2025, focusing on practical use cases for market research, competitive research on new programs, marketing use cases, and I provided, said, hey, this use case is for presidents, VP of enrollments, so on and so forth. And I also provided my presentation description. So you can ask anything, right? And it asked me a couple of clarifying questions. I said, great. It's always going to ask you clarifying questions if you're using ChatGPT, but we're going to take a look at a couple of other tools as well, like Gemini or Perplexity, that are doing deep research as well. So if you're using any of these chatbots, if you're using ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Perplexity, they all have a deep research feature now. It varies differently from one to the other based on my experience, and I actually have all of them. I think ChatGPT Deep Research with the O3 model that it uses underneath is probably one of the best ones today. So that's why I use it very, very heavily. So here, it asks me a bunch of questions. It says, which audience segments should we focus on? Do you want to include prompts or templates? Are you looking for tool comparisons? Any specific examples you like to include? Because I told it to find out a use case for a legislator, like what new laws came about that affects us and so on and so forth. So you can go ahead, and the best way that I have found, you can do this in free form, you can respond in free form, but mentally I like to answer each one of those questions by doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and then just clarifying them. So I said, hey, just anyways, so we go through this, and then it goes ahead and, in this case, it looked at about 20 different sources in here. This is the final report, but it took, I don't know how long it took. It takes a long time. So if you look over here, it can go to YouTube, it can read Reddit, it can do podcasts, because I asked it to search for specific use cases. There is this podcast, Marketing Against the Grain, and those guys are amazing. They do a lot of, they're the CMO of HubSpot and someone else from HubSpot, but they have a really, really good podcast that they talk a lot about, and they use deep research, and they have some really good prompts. So I told it to just search that and see if you can pull some things from there in their style. So it did that. So you can see over here a lot of different sources, right? It's gone back and forth with podcasts, with different resources, and finally it gave me a report. And what this report looks like is pretty practical report, right? So it's citing its sources. So everything that you see in here, it cites the sources. And perhaps that is one of the most important things about deep research. So when you're doing research, you always want to cite your sources, so you know that the information is factual. This is the biggest difference between asking ChatGPT straight up to give you an answer, like what is the best program for whatever. It's going to use its own internal knowledge. And when you do deep research, it goes out and pulls the information relevant and does the search and the research on the web, brings that back, and then it uses that as the context for that answer. Remember, it reasons all through. So if you want factual information to be based on real factual information without hallucinations and with real-time data, you should use deep research to do that deeper questions. It's going to take a little bit longer, but it's always going to give you these references to information. And of course it did this, right? It says what it is. It's an agentic capability provided with its different systems. It can show you where it pulled that information from. But if we go through this, I pulled a few examples. Let's go down, right? It's giving the capabilities and then the use cases. It said, great, I pulled a bunch of your ideas around these use cases, but here's some of them in marketing teams for higher education, AI, this deep research. So generating brand voice and style guides, so going out and pulling in your website or other resources. Things like campaign brainstorming, content creation, SEO research, so your teams can go in and identify SEO keywords for programs or for your institution or for opportunities. It's going to go ahead and do that. Things like market trend analysis and thought leadership content. Think about all of these different places like McKinsey and Gartner and higher ed sources as well. You can go ahead and do that. And here is, we're going to take a look at one of those runs as well. Things like personal development for student targeting or persona development. And as we go through, then there's a lot of other use cases that it pulled out or that it kind of recommended me. Competitive research on academic programs, so you can do that. Use cases can be around student yield strategies and data strategies, persona development for recruiting, enrollment funnel content and CRM automate. Again, you can see how all of these different use cases that it went ahead and found and said, okay, you can use all of these different things. So a couple other ones. This is an interesting one. Analyzing a strategic plan or accreditation self-studies to analyze these plans and kind of come up with competitive research or KPIs in those areas. So I'm going through a lot of this, right? And you can see how all the use cases that you can think about of a question that your team has to deal with, and you're not sure what is the best and the latest research and the latest content for how to do this thing or answer these questions in the market today, deep research can answer that for you. So if you're not an expert in anything, and this is how I use it. I'm not an expert in whatever you want to call it, right? So I've done I do a lot of we do have this podcast called Generation AI, and we try to come up with episodes and topics for those episodes. And the first thing that we do is go in and do a deep research query to see what is the latest news or what is the latest thinking or even some of the historical background on that particular topic. You'll come back and break that down for us, do all the research. Something that would have taken hours and hours and days and months, it can kind of come down to just a few minutes with deep research. And then based on that, these reports are amazing to read, right? Because it's really, really good. All right, so let's take a couple of these. So before we go on, is there a use case, because it can take a few minutes, is there a use case that we want to try out as part of the deep research right now in order to continue, let it run, and then we can kind of go back to it during the presentation? Nobody? Okay. Yeah. I have something very similar in terms of competitive research on that. So something maybe a little bit more fun, we can go ahead and kick one off around research that happened at Engage Summit. Their impact on higher ed. So I can go ahead and just kick that off, and it's going to come back with its clarifying questions. Are we referring to the Engage Summit 25 hosted by a specific organization, example sales? So number one is yes, element 451. Are you looking for a summary of all sessions, keynotes, takeaways or topics? And okay. And number three, should the research focus specifically on how the summit's content impacts higher ed? Yes. Okay, so we're going to let that run. This is what happens. It kickstarts starting that research process, and then it's going to continue. And here on the right-hand side, if you want to look at it and exactly what it's doing, you can kind of keep that open. But we're going to let it do its research and forget about it and then come back to it a little bit later. So the couple other things that I did here were, let me see if I can open this up. I had a couple of examples that I ran, and rather than me rerunning those examples again, I'm going to go in here and go back to all of them. So one of them that I ran was, you see how long that is? So one of them that I ran was a research, I guess I mistyped it, but provide a competitive analysis of Chowan University. I just happened to have that in my brain when I did this a little earlier today. Online degree offerings versus our competitors in state and out of state, include program portfolio differences, pricing, tuition, unique marketing angles, and any notable strengths or weaknesses in how each is promoted. I just copied it from the deep research that I asked, what kind of research can I do? And this is one of the little snippets that he gave me before. Conclude with opportunities for Chowan University to differentiate itself. So he came up with clarifying questions with specific competitors. Should I focus on undergrad, grad, online? Which is pretty smart, right? It understands the context of your question and it's coming back with, are there particular fields of study? So if you want a particular in an area or a program, is there a preferred time frame for enrollment, ranking, past 3 years? So typical fashion, I provided 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, I said, you figure out the competitors. I have no idea what the competitors are. I want just graduate programs, and I want all field areas, and then recent is better. So you can, this is all natural language, right? So you just need to get that context. So he went ahead and built that report for me, and it's a pretty deep report, right? So if I don't know anything about Chowan University, I'm a consultant coming in, and I've been given $50,000 or $100,000 to actually answer that question by the president, and now I have to provide a report. I can do that in about 10 minutes and export this, and this is just so good because I don't know anything about them, but he went ahead and pulled all the relevant information. They only offer one fully online degree program, Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership. You can see exactly where he pulled the information from. It's a 30-credit master's, so it's giving me that background. The online enrollment reflects a narrow offering. Only about 75 students out of about 700 total are enrolled. Again, he pulled the information from different sources. You could also provide, as part of that prompt, and we'll take a look at an example, you can provide your own internal PDFs or documents that you have as well, right? You can give it, you can upload those files, and it will use those as references for that. So as we go through, you're seeing now the breakdown of this report. In-state competitors, University of Mount Olive in North Carolina, providing a lot more degrees. It's kind of going through and saying pricing and tuition. Mount Olive's undergraduate fees are about $27K, almost identical to Chowan's, which is interesting. And then graduate tuition about $18K, so per unit. So it's breaking this down. Like this is actually, think about this as like a true analyst, right? It's breaking all these pieces down and then giving you all the different information in here. The marketing angle and promotions. Mount Olive markets itself heavily towards working adults and transfer students with taglines, 100% online degree programs, and so on and so forth. So the other thing that it can do, it can kind of do the strengths and weaknesses because it's reasoning through all of these different things. So I'm not gonna go too much into detail in here, but you can see the report capabilities on just those two prompts that I gave it. And you can ask whatever you want. Another in-state competitor. So we went through all of the in-state competitors, did the analysis, the marketing angle, strength, weaknesses for all of them. Out-of-state competitors, Liberty University, obviously they're a big one for online. And then diving, wow, I mean, it just put a lot of reporting together in here. So let's go a little bit further down and the opportunities part. So it did a little bit of research and says niche program focus. Rather than trying to match the breadth of larger, differentiate by developing niche programs. So it's kind of starting to do the recommendations as well in here. Because it's a reasoning model, not only can you ask it for a report, but it can use that context as well to reason through for kind of putting strategy together or thinking through that as well. All right, so lots of really good information in here, and you're gonna say, look at all the different sources that it has all the sources, and what you can do is you can export this report so somebody can read it and take some action on it. So you can export it as a downloadable PDF. I can download it as a PDF or share a link to somebody so they can go to it directly and they can read it online. On top of that, now I can start this and I can continue this conversation with someone. So I do the deep research, I share the link to this, to this conversation with someone else, and then now they have this as the context, and then they can start asking it questions or follow-up questions. And then, put together a exec summary for my president. And of course, you can't type in a stage as you're doing a demo. So I always try to use the O3 model. It's probably one of the best models. So no matter what, I try to use O3. It's really good for, obviously it's a reasoning model. It takes a little bit longer, but it does an amazing job in terms of giving you probably the best output right now. So in this case, it's also, because it uses different tools, it's also doing a little bit of searching based on that context. If it needs any follow-up questions, it can do search and get more information as needed as well. So I'm going to stop here to see if there's any questions so far. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, how does it compare validity of sources? And the answer is, I don't know. It's based on, it pulls multiple different sources together, right? So it kind of obviously looks across most of those sources. It's very similar to when you go to Google and you, as an analyst, you're trying to analyze this. So you saw that it pulled information from one source, it asked a question, it went ahead and pulled information from another source, and it kind of looks at those cross sources. So there is no way to tell it use this. I mean, there is a way to tell it use particular sources in your search as well, and you can guide it that way. But I think it does a pretty good job. It's comparable to like how you do Google. Google research, but now it's doing thousands of those searches for you in real time. Here's that report that we did in here. So we pulled together a report. It kind of pulled together executive summary, last 24 months, what it is, and this is for my president, and here is the portfolio. So there's a portfolio gap. Competitors average 8 to 14 online masters. They only offer one, so it's a narrow catalog. Scale, visibility, online headcount amount, Olive and Gartner are about 20 times Chowan, so there's a price pressure there, marketing differentiation observed, and then the opportunity to differentiate, kind of a quick report around that as well in here. So I feel very confident that what it's producing in here, to be honest, is 100% better than what we would have produced a year ago, even when I ran a marketing agency, or when we worked in a marketing agency, we did a lot of this type of work or research work. So, so much better. So start using it. All right, let's move on to another one. In this one, we're gonna go back, and what I did is I went in and said, find out what new degree programs in AI have been announced by. So I'm trying to do competitive research, right? And I'm trying to tell it what programs in a particular field have been announced by universities in our region in the last 2 years, analyze which have gained traction, enrollment or press mentions, and identify any high demand program areas not yet offered by key competitors. So again, think about research, that competitive analysis. It's asking me where do I want to focus on, so on and so forth. I told North Carolina what kind of schools. I gave Duke and similar schools, and then I told it that just yes, I want all these different fields. So we went ahead, and you can see in here it took research completed. It took 10 minutes with about 26 sources, and it did 130 searches in order to pull that together. So you can see that not only it's using 26 sources, but it actually did 130 searches to pull relevant information. So it went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth multiple times to do that. So we put a report, again, together for us in here in terms of what the opportunities are. So UNC Chapel Hill, it seems like they have a Master in Applied Data Science, launched in 24, a BS in Data Science for Chapel Hill, BA in Data Science. So you can see all of the work that's being done, BS in AI from North Carolina A&T, Wake Forest, and so on and so forth. So you can see the regional universities in here that are, and then again, you can go down. But this is another use case for competitive research for any programs or competitive research specifically. All right, so let's take a look at another use case. And then in this one, what I wanted to do, let's go back up here, is I wanted to do deep research, perform an analysis of out-of-state recruitment opportunities for, again, Chowan University. Specifically, identify 2 to 3 states where our applicant numbers have been growing or could grow due to population or interest trends, what competition universities are popular in those states, and any states level academic initiatives or scholarships or whatever, provide data like high school graduation stats and so on and so forth. So pretty complex in terms of this research and pulling those and interjecting them together. It went ahead and did that research in here as well. And you can see that in some cases it actually introduces, or it kind of puts together, it brings images as well. Southern demographic trends that are happening in the market, high growth states, stable neighboring states like Virginia. Obviously, Chowan is in North Carolina, as you heard this morning. So Virginia, the proximity and regional appeal. Going down, South Carolina, it's another one, but this is a growing graduate pool, but in-state incentives. So you can see neighboring states, obviously, and that's what we asked it, and it's providing us with that final report in here. Okay, so we just went through 3 or 4 different use cases in here for deep research on competitive analysis and looking for opportunities, doing this research, data research, coming back in. The next example, what I did is I went in and I went to TSTC and I saw a strategic plan budget report for fiscal year 2020. And this is a report that you guys probably have in your schools. But what I wanted to show in here is the capabilities of it for you to upload files and these reports or whatever you have to do the research on these different files on top of doing the research, in external data sources as well. So this is really important because O3, not only can it do research on text information, but you can also upload spreadsheet information as well. So it can do data analysis on your spreadsheets. It can look at those numbers. It can do that analysis. And then it can go out and based on that can kind of bring all these different pieces together. It's really hard to kind of wrap your head around how the hell does it work, but it's, these agentic workflows it's a loop, right? It reasons, it acts, and then it adapts, meaning that it looks at information, it reasons through that information based on what the goal is, it searches more information or whatever it needs to do. So if the reasoning is, I need to analyze this, it's going to use a tool to analyze the data, and it's going to go use a tool to go search the web to bring more context in if he needs to find more information. If he has a question, it reasons about that and says, okay, does this answer the question? Does it get me closer? It builds a plan. And so it kind of follows this loop over and over again. So that's why sometimes it can take 5 minutes, it can take an hour, it can take 30 minutes to do all of this depending on how complex that question is. So in this case, let's see how long it took. It took about 10 minutes, okay. 11 sources, and it did 60 searches. So in this case, what I asked it to do is I said, analyze the strategic plan, identify any areas where metrics or benchmarks are not defined, suggest examples of measurable KPIs for those areas. That based on best practices in higher ed. Do some research against it. I'm like, okay, I just want to make sure that the strategic plan that you're giving me is solid here. And if I were a smarty ass, I would come back and say, hey, you guys are missing all these different things in here. Have you thought about X, Y, and Z? So he went ahead and did that, and he put together, this report. Obviously, it's kind of doing a quick, it's saying it's doing a quick review in here in terms of the program offerings, goals, and missing metrics around new programs launched, enrollment in new programs, course program fill rates, kind of external benchmarks around those. It's providing like benchmarking on what they can look like. So again, it's using your internal data, it's using your internal reports. The sources don't have to be on the web. And if you've connected to your drive, you don't even have to upload the files, right? You can just ask it and it can look at your OneDrive, what's the Microsoft SharePoint, or you can look at those resources and do that same work. All right, so I think I have one more last, let's see, how many more examples do I have here? We looked at this one. We looked at the strategic plan, out of state, program analysis, and we looked at the peer. Oh, here's one. I said, give me a quick scorecard comparison to 5 peers on enrollment, retention, graduation rates, and search. And this is where I told it to look at iPad's data in order to pull that information, right? I didn't tell it where to look. I just said, hey, this is the data source that you should probably look at. And he went ahead and did that, and he gave me, this is a shorter comparison in here, but you can see where it pulled the data from. Data USA, where it's actually Data USA, it's a front end for a lot of the iPad's data. You guys might be familiar with it. It provided me the standings, how many students he has, and so on. So this is a little bit shorter report. So, what do you think? Useful so far? What I use it for is anything and everything that I try to do deep research, meaning that any topic where I start to put a presentation together, or I have done examples where if you're an Element user, you can come in and rather than asking our team or asking in live support, what's the best approach to implement data tracking through Google Tag Manager in Element, right? And because it has access to help.element451.com, and it knows exactly, it can pull all that content together, and it knows how Google Tag Manager works and what the best practices are, it will give you a strategy for how to track funnel reporting or how to track marketing attribution in Element as an analyst. And I did that same exact example with our success team 3 weeks ago, because that was one of the questions that we got. One of the teams had set up a 2-hour meeting to go through the strategy for setting this whole thing up. And the team was freaking out because they're like, well, I mean, we're not a marketing agency, but like they're really asking for us to go deep in this. And what's the strategy? What's the best practices? How do we set it up? Here's kind of the tag manager and the different sources that we have. So I'm like, don't panic. Let's just do a deep research. And it spit out a report that the team went, holy shit, we can actually, I can literally just take this and send it over, and now we don't have to have that 2-hour meeting. And it can be very specific around what fields to use. And that's one of the things that why we keep all of our documentation public. Our APIs and everything is public, so it can actually reach and kind of figure those things out. You could do a deep research on how to implement an integration, maybe the presentation that you saw before with Zapier, and how do you do X and Y and connect certain things. So it's not about just competitive research. It's about technical work as well, best practices on how to do CRM implementations and work as well. All right, so let's go back to that one deep research that we did around Engage. Oh boy, we put a lot of stuff together in here. Well, look at this. So, Engage Summit 25 in Charlotte, June 24th, over 600 people, 2,000 virtually, people. It seems like we're ready. Hey, look at that. Look where it pulled the information from. Episode 82 of one of my podcasts. I launched it on Monday, and we talked a lot about the different sessions and kind of the impact. So we pulled together a bunch of that stuff. It went through those sources. I don't know if it doesn't do very good with social. I think social is pretty locked down, so it doesn't do the social listening. That's the only thing that I would perhaps, how many of you use Grok? So how many of you guys do use Grok? Okay, we got one person, two. So now we can go into some of the different systems that you can use for these and what are they good for. So ChatGPT with deep research, probably one of the best at a general deep research, really good reports, amazing work. It doesn't do social very well, social listening. Grok does a really good job because he has access to the real-time feed on X, and it understands real-time news that's happening and what's going on and what people are saying. So it's doing the social listening. So you can do that work directly through here, and you can do deep research on Grok, and we can go ahead and ask it the same question, and Grok will be a little bit faster, to be honest. I don't know why, but let's ask it this questions, and it doesn't really do clarifying questions. That's a ChatGPT feature, and you can see in here it's going and pulling that information. I don't know how many X users we have. We are very heavy users of LinkedIn. I haven't found a good LinkedIn, one that does and social listens on LinkedIn, but I think X is really, really good for a lot of stuff is in there as well. So we'll go ahead and do that. Anyways, it's going to take some time. The other one, so Gemini. Gemini has a deep research feature as well. I can, let me go and enter it. It's the same exact prompt. And Gemini works a little bit differently in that it will actually give you kind of a research plan, and you can kind of edit that plan. So it works a little bit differently than ChatGPT. But if the plan is ready, you can just say, start the research, and it's going to go ahead and do that work for you. And you can see all the thinking in here of what's happening, but also you can also look the sites browsed. So I do like their real-time visualization is a lot better. And because Gemini we're a Google shop, it connects really nicely with the Google ecosystem. It also remembers my preferences and searches. it does a really good job in that ecosystem. So, but you can also upload files in here, very similar to, you can upload files very similar, or even code. I think you can upload code as well. All right, the other one that I tend to use is Perplexity. How many of you use Perplexity? 1, 2, yes, all right. So Perplexity has been, so out of the 3 that I showed, OpenAI, ChatGPT, Google with Gemini, Grok, powered by XAI, all of these are frontier labs and models, so they build their own models, so there's a flavor of how this deep research works. In Perplexity, you can go ahead and mix and match, so it's just a front end, and it's an amazing tool. It was one of the first tools that got started around this deep research idea. But they have the ability for you to go in and enable and do deep research. They've introduced a couple of other interesting things in here. So I really like Perplexity because I can do a lot more with these deep research reports, and it probably does a little bit better job in that real-time data sources because they're kind of feeding in a few other proprietary data sources that might not be available in other places as well. So I do like their usability and their UX, a lot better than some of the other ones. So I asked the same exact question in here that I did before. It did the research. I can look at all the steps that it took. So when I said reasoning models, this is it. This is what's happening here. All this different reasoning, we can continue. You can look at the sources and the research. And now I have this report. And one of the things that I can do is I can go ahead and share this, or I can export it. But the nice thing about Perplexity is that, yes, you can export it as a Word doc or a PDF or Markdown, but they also have this notion of Perplexity pages. So I can put a report together. I can put a Perplexity page, which is a web page. I can bring in kind of a structured report that I can share with somebody, which is a lot nicer than just a PDF or, so I think we're kind of coming in on time. I don't know how much time do I have. 1 minute, oh geez, okay. Well, I think you guys get the idea, and I'm just gonna conclude by saying, look, deep research, amazing tool, very practical. A lot of the chatbots or a lot of these AI tools are using it. They're incorporating your proprietary data, meaning you can connect it to internal data sources, and you can also connect it to external data sources, does the web. If you're a coder, or if you're somebody who deals with code, and it can connect to GitHub as well, so you can do deep research on your code to figure out and to find problems or find bugs or essentially give you a description of how this thing works in the code. If you're in the web and you're doing WordPress development or plugin development or anything like that, deep research is really your friend. All right, thank you all. Happy to answer any questions after this, but I feel like I gave you quite a bit of stuff to chew through.